This set of conversations is obviously designed to deal with Women's Month, and I'd like to thank our panelists for coming on board and our two moderators. I'll hand over to them in a second. This particular program is being hosted by August House, which is a studio space located in Braamfontein. In Doornfontein. We currently have 40 odd artists working from the space, and the space has been around since 2006. In addition to that, is a newly formed foundation called the Meta Foundation, whose job it is to program at August House. So collectively between the Meta Foundation and August House, we are hosting this event. There are going to be 4 of these, which will run into the middle of September, each dealing with a quite specific topic relating to being a woman and how, as a visual artist, you experience your life in this ecosystem. Hopefully, if we do our job well from this, we will host a survey with you guys where we want to take out quite specific problems that hopefully we can actually do something about, because we're aware that this conversation has happened a number of times and we'd like to actually be fixing stuff rather than just talking about it endlessly. That will be run by the Meta Foundation, and the Meta Foundation really is focusing on this idea of an ecosystem. So how does it support the entire ecosystem that exists? So artists are one part of that, the work is another part of that, and the audiences are another part of that. So the programming is going to be quite diverse. But now I would like to hand over to our moderators, Palesa and Olwethu, who are going to be moderating not just this conversation, but all of the ones going forward. And I'd like to thank them for their time in helping us do this. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi everyone. I'm Olwethu de Vos, and I'm an artist and a curator. And Palesa?
I'm Palesa. I'm an art curator and also the founder of the Grand African Art Society, which is an online platform for sharing art. Thank you for joining us.
So I think basically Sarah has said everything in terms of the reason why we're doing this talk. It's going to be a series of conversations and over the next 2 months. So basically we're just trying to have a conversation with other female artists and helping each other just navigate our way through the industry. As we know that the art industry is predominantly like male dominated, so we just want more female power out there. So I think we're just gonna go right into it and start. Is everyone ready? I think we would just like to have it's more of a conversation. It's not necessarily like interview vibes.
I just wanted to point out, if you have any questions for us, there's a chat button right at the bottom of your screen, and you can type out your question there. And later on, we're gonna leave 15 minutes of the talk for answering questions. So that's how we're gonna start. Okay. Great. So the first question I'd like to ask our panelists is, did you ever imagine yourself becoming a parent as an artist before? So let's start with Lerato. Lerato, can you give us your first answer?
Yes, that's me now. Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'm okay. So I'll be honest. It was not planned. It was unexpected. But yeah, I went with it. It's a beautiful experience. But I'd never pictured myself a mother right now.
Wow. Okay.
I'll be honest.
Sorry guys, I just want to track back. We didn't introduce the panelists. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So for this topic, it's basically about being a parent, being a mother, and being a wife in the art industry, and how you guys managed to sustain your career or are still sustaining your career. And we have invited Lerato Lodi, Bronwyn Lace,
Usha Seejarim and Louise Van de Bijl. Thank you so much for joining us.
So these ladies, to everyone else out there, these are our panelists, and these are the people, or the females and women that we are having the conversation with. Yeah. So if we can go to Bronwyn also, if we can get your opinion about how, if you ever saw yourself as a parent, because we know, we all know as artists we're so career driven. You know, for me personally, it's always been something that has been like last on my list. So just want to see, just hear from you guys if it was like even a possibility or something you were just looking forward to.
Thanks, Olwethu. I did. I imagined and planned to have our child. I think what I didn't imagine was the challenges that came with it and the kinds of challenges that have presented themselves. When I became pregnant, I had a show booked already, and the show was kind of due at the same time as the baby. And I was pretty stubborn and refused to move the show because it was my first proper solo and it was a big opportunity for me. So I shifted it by a couple of weeks really, and thought, well, it's fine, I'm just going to do this with a newborn. And I wish I hadn't done that because it was kind of traumatic. I'm very proud of the show that I put on, and I'm very proud of my child, but it was an incredibly difficult first 6 months that I think could have been happier. But I was very, very aware of losing opportunity, and I think in the back of my mind also maybe being kind of forgotten was a concern of mine. And you know, I think in the art world right now, and certainly 8 years ago, it wasn't particularly sexy to be a mother, so that was something I was aware of. There is a inbuilt discrimination, I think, in the Pacific, and in become mothers and caretakers too.
Thank you, Bronwyn. I want to go to Usha. Usha, how are you? Same question.
I'm fine. Thank you for having me on this panel.
Did you ever imagine yourself being a
I never imagined myself being on a panel with other women artists who are mothers. I think it's the first time that this has been discussed. As it's often brought up, and I'm often asked about the challenges of mother and an artist, but never along with other. My son came 2.5 years, and not only about challenges of being a newborn, those challenges continue at each keep shifting. So parenting is not a straightforward thing. I think it's so layered and it's so complex and it's so it's all over. You know, it's not just a straight thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let's go to Louise. Louise, welcome.
I only have a very little bit of one hasn't yet, but she looks lovely. So,
hi. I very much the same as Bronwyn and Usha. I also had kids, but I don't know how you can imagine even what it's like to be an artist with kids. I had these weird ideas in my head of how I was going to make it work, and it did not pan out like that at all. And much like Bronwyn, I also had all these opportunities happening for me just before my first was born. I also had a solo exhibition planned, and I was managing a project, and I was very, very sick. I had very bad hyperemesis, like throwing up But as an artist, you're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do everything. I can't miss any of the opportunities. And it's been really hard working through it. I've got 2 kids now, and 5 years down the line, or 6 years down the line. I've learned a lot, and it's not been easy at all. And also, to echo what Usha said, it's really weird how suddenly this artist mom thing is a thing, because it wasn't a thing at all. And I felt completely alone when I about 6 months after having my first child, I found myself like in my studio space, in the studios that I was running, and no one knew what I was going through. I was like, this is crazy, I can't do this. Yeah, it's really hard. And there seems to be increasingly more support appearing. I don't know why, I don't know what it is. I came across a podcast in the last year, which I've been listening to a lot. It's American, so it's a bit annoying, but it's called the Artist Mother Podcast, like a whole podcast just for artist moms. And it's like astonishing. There's all these women out there doing the same thing with the same struggles. But for a long time, I felt completely alone. So it's really great to talk about it. But yeah, there's very little that can prepare you for trying to grapple with the how do I make this work. And I've done it with my kids in tow, which is just madness. And to echo what Bronwyn said, I feel like there's a lot of decisions I could have made differently to make it a happier, easier process at times. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question would be directed to you, Curator, because I know that I think when you had your child, you were also sort of straight out of varsity, you know, young emerging blood. So it's like, what were the fears and that were going through your mind like during your pregnancy? Because obviously when the child arrives, it's all about how the child is there. You're trying to maneuver, and what do you do next? But then psychologically, you know, during those 8 to 9 months, like what were the fears running in your head, and how did you, you know, just keep yourself calm and just get through that? Did you even think about quitting art?
Okay, thank you, Olwethu. Honestly, it was such an overwhelming experience. I'm still traumatized. My son is actually 1 year and 6 months, so he's a toddler. So it's been really hard, and I'll put it out there, I'm a single mother as well. So I've always wanted to always be in the studio. That's the one thing I did not want to let go of. I had to be in there. I made sure I brought toys into that room. But it was extremely challenging because there was a point, I think the first 3 months, I was going through a phase of doubting myself. Can I still do this? I am alone. Firstly, I'm Black and I'm only 24. My family has no interest in the arts. And on top of that, I'm a master's student, and you have a toddler, a baby in the house. So I'm still finding my way around it. I'll be honest, I'll be real. But I wouldn't change it. I'll do it all over again.
So Bronwyn, would you have any advice for other women out there? Like, because as you mentioned earlier, that you already had a lot going and so many deadlines. So would you have advice for other women out there of like, basically just keeping your mental state in check?
Yeah, I think the mental state is extremely important. And I mean, I was just thinking now and reflecting as Loretta was speaking as well. At that opening or at that exhibition that I made when my child was just born, I did a walkabout, and I remember I had her in the little pouch. I just fed her, and then I had this kind of public walkabout, and quite a well-known South African male artist who's enjoyed a career of about 40 years and has 4 children himself, I subsequently learned, watched me in the walkabout and followed it, and then afterwards came to speak to me, and he said to me he thought it was such a pity I'd had a baby, because I'd have to now take this time out of what was looking like an interesting career to raise my child. And it destabilized me so severely, because this was somebody I respected, whose work I respected. I didn't know him particularly well, but his opinion was important to me. And it only occurred to me weeks later, after I sort of was recovering from that wobbly, that I was standing with a newborn strapped to my chest, and I had just put an exhibition on, and I was giving a walkabout. And if there was going to be a more difficult period in my life with this child and making art, I struggled to imagine it. And yet I was doing it then. And so then I went and I researched a little bit and found out that he'd had 4 kids. And I thought, interesting, and 4 kids and 40 years of practice, he hasn't had to take time out. And, you know, I think people say things unwittingly and sometimes very deliberately. And it is a lonely space. I think this kind of initiative, this kind of platform, speaking to other women artists and artists who are parents, and certainly Lorata, as a single mother, I take my hat off to you, and I hope that there are communities of your peers out there supporting you and putting you forward, because it's not an easy road, but it is so essential that our voices are heard, because our lived experience actually adds to the work that we are able to make. And I think our voices are important in the current trajectory of thought around how we continue to humanize our world.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
That is profound.
It is. It is. And on that note, I want to start with Usha. I know that your work is very delicate. You work with a lot of materials that could be potentially dangerous for a child to be around. But
or for kids to be around. Okay, I understand. Yes.
Yes. Did becoming a parent add or take away from your career, especially with the first child?
I think both. I think I'll first think about how it took away. I think the biggest thing that you don't realize, particularly as an artist, is how your focus is spread or diluted to have a child. And it's not as simple as having an hour here or having 2 hours or having the time. It's mental and emotional kind of
in general, it's all fine.
Somebody talking. It's about having your own headspace. It's having your own place that is now set. Now, I think you carry or these little needs and they whatever they need, that there's so little left for yourself. And then you're trying to push your own needs, trying to fit what you need to do within that. That's the biggest challenge. But I think what I did at my studio was that I was lucky enough to have quite a large space, and I had a room within the studio that was dedicated for the kids. My first child, when she was there alone, which was her space, a kind of little nursery. And I work with tools. I work with power tools and drills and grinders and whatever. So I would just be really careful. But the advantage of having a child in my studio is that she's grown up around artworks. She's grown up around creativity. Both my kids are critical thinkers, because as artists, this is what we do. We question things. They have an incredible visual literacy. They are so familiar with just a sense of aesthetic. They have a developed sense of a visual language, which I think other kids don't have. And we kind of take this for granted because they're surrounded by it all the time. You know, recently at the last Joburg Art Fair, like you learn little tricks also on how to get your kids engaged, right? So at the last art fair, I took my kids, I had a meeting with my gallerist. And so I said to them, I need an hour and I need you to do something while I have this meeting. So I prepared a little treasure hunt for them because I'd been to the art fair before, I knew what was there. So they had to find little things. And one of the staff members from the gallery said she would just follow them and make sure they were okay. And one of the things they had to look for was to find out how many William Kentridges they could spot at the art fair. And what she said to me afterwards was, she was amazed that they were looking at the labels to read whether it was a William Kentridge. They were identifying it through his style. This is, I mean, this is an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old who have that acute sense of aesthetic, which I think it's a privilege that we give them, which we don't exactly value it because it's so normal. So there's other advantages like that, I think, that we as mothers and as mothers who are artists give our kids. I don't know if I veered off a bit.
That is so interesting because I was having a conversation with a fellow peer of mine, and we were discussing how why is art so successful internationally, like when you go abroad compared to South Africa. And one of the key pointers that we dwelled on was that it's because, you know, they teach them art from a very, very young age. If you're not going to be an artist, you know, you can be an art collector, you can be a gallerist, you can be a curator. Basically, they also teach you the value of art and how to invest in art. And that is why like the buying market is so big when you go abroad. So we're just talking about how in South Africa, it's like, it's really important to teach kids and make your family understand the importance and the value of art. So yeah, I think that's really great.
And from a young age.
From a young age.
From a young age, because I feel like a lot gets lost.
Can I just add to that also? I think in South Africa, I mean, when I was at high school, there wasn't really art that was valued. In my family, I mean, I still don't think that they understand what it means to be an artist. And when I went to university,
Your speaker is muted.
Okay. When I went to university, I felt quite disadvantaged because I hadn't had the same level of art education as the white students had had. And I think particularly for artists of color, we building a different generation of kids who have access. The fact that you can go to a museum and you can go to a gallery and it's free is not enough to build confidence in South Africans to be able to have access to art. But it starts also with us educating our kids and bringing them up in this kind of culture.
Louise, what's your opinion on the question, on the topic? Like, has it added, having kids added to your career? Has it taken away from your career?
Sure. I don't know, both, I suppose. The same as Usha. It slowed me down in some ways from my so I was in like a full-on space when I had my first kid. I was running a non-profit arts organization, supporting other artists, a very full program. Plus I had my own studio and I was trying to make work, building to exhibitions. Like, I had a ton going on. And what happened once I'd had my son is I found that I had to make a choice between choices around what I could and couldn't take on. Because the reality is, as Usha was saying, with kids, you're divided. You can't do too much. You've got to look after their needs, you've got to look after your needs, and then you've got to choose what are you going to do from a career point of view. And so I found myself, I found it quite difficult to make art because my studio, I took my baby in with me to my studio, and I had this weird idea that I was going to be able to like paint while he sat in the corner, which didn't work at all. and I couldn't really resolve the where to move my studio to for a while. So I was battling with that. So I put my energies into the organization that I was running, and it needed that at the time. And there was a lot of things we were doing. So, and it was easy to take my baby with me to, whether it was installing an exhibition or visiting artists in their studios, or we had a print workshop or organizing workshops. I mean, I think about now and it sounds like, how was it easy to have my baby in tow? But it was. He didn't have paint that he could put his fingers in, but he could crawl around on the floor. No one minded. He loves the fact that he was playing with tools. And even now, he thinks it's brilliant. He knows everything about tools. But he was playing with tools when he was like a year old, quite happily banging in the wall while I was installing art. And yeah, I couldn't do everything. So I think it took away my own space and the space to make. And it's taken me years to reclaim that. I now do have a studio at home, and like Usha, I've set it up so my kids have a corner where they play, and they do a ton of crafting and painting and making, and it's all they want to do all the time. Also, I can see exactly the same thing happening with my kids, Usha. I mean, mine are quite a bit younger, but also they've been exposed to exhibitions and they've been exposed to art, and they are so confident in making and creating, and they just want to do it all the time. And I can put them at a table with paint and they're going at it. They're not making a mess. They're painting pictures and they've got whole stories about what they're doing. But that's also come with the decision to close the organization down. So because that has gone from my life, I now have capacity to put energy back into my own making, because I just couldn't do all of it. It was actually impossible. And I made the choice to look after my children on my own. I haven't had a nanny or anything like that. Before lockdown, they were finally both in school in the mornings. So that was like a big thing, because finally I had my mornings free. But it meant that, I was looking after them and trying to, and I found the arts industry was quite accommodating towards that. To have my kids in tow, I can sit in a meeting and breastfeed and no one would complain, which I don't think any other industries are maybe as accommodating. And as I said, I could take my kids to events and no one would complain. But yeah, I find when I'm painting, it's, it takes a certain type of energy and it changes the way you're thinking, and you've got to concentrate. So, and if my kids aren't occupied, it's almost impossible to do it. So weirdly, lockdown's been really good for that in terms of finding a rhythm between my children and myself. And we're now in quite a good space where we have activities and we play, and then I have time to paint, and they're okay with that. So I'm actually getting painting done every single day with my children around me. And I think it's because we've kind of created this new routine and schedule where they've become used to being in my space with me, and they're also bigger now, so it does help a little bit. I mean, the youngest is 3, so he's kind of just past that annoying toddler get into everything phase. So yeah, I don't know. I think you've got to be really gentle with yourself, because kids take a huge amount from you, and you can put a huge amount of, there's all guilt stuff, guilt that you're not doing the right stuff for them, but also guilt that you're not in the arts and doing your art, and you all want to be, being an artist is, another thing I found is it's not the same as being, I don't know, a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. It's it's a part of me, you want to do it, and you feel divided between the two. So I don't know, I'm still figuring it out, but I'm finding being gentle, trying not to do too much, and including the kids in as much as possible seems to be working for now. Yeah.
On that note, Louise, before you leave, I wanted to ask, how do you not lose yourself in the different roles that you play as a mother, as an artist? So how do you lose yourself? Because you do need that alone time. You do need to gather yourself back to yourself at some point. How do you not lose yourself in your different roles? Let's start with you, Louise.
Sure, it's hard. I find it hard. I think some people are better at this than me. Yeah, finding support from my partner, that he takes some of the pressure, and whether he takes the kids for an hour or whatever. It's also boundaries with the children, I'm finding, being clear with them that now mom is doing this, you go and do something. But it's very difficult when they're really little. I found that they're just so needy. They need so much from you. And like a 1-year-old or 2-year-old, they don't understand when you need time out. So I found that there's certain times of the day which become like almost sacred. So evenings, once they're asleep, that becomes like a few hours you've got before you go to sleep, where you can to put energy into your own stuff or spend time with your partner. And also exercise time, like finding time to do exercise. So at the moment, a lot of it's with the kids in tow, but it doesn't really matter that much. It's like just getting outside, and they can run around, and I'm walking in a park. So I suppose it's like you got to fight for it. You got to like decide what it is and it's going to be short. It's going to be a little bit of time that you have. But there's also decisions you can make around how you parent that allow for more or less of that kind of reclaiming of yourself, I think, from what I've experienced. Whether it's putting them into a school or getting someone to help. I mean, I have had grandparents who have been quite reliant on this at times as well. You know, go and dump them with them, and then I go and do what I need to do. Yeah.
So you just have to make the effort.
Yeah, you got to fight. Like it's really hard. Like this, you feel the guilt is there, you know, but you've got to push back against it. So they'll live. They'll be okay without me for 2 hours. Yeah.
Lerato, I definitely have to ask you as a single mom, because Louise mentioned that you know, getting support from her partner, and you know, going to the park, especially now during the lockdown. How have you, like, how do you keep to yourself, like not lose yourself and just not be Lerato, you know, this woman Lerato?
Thank you, Olwethu. In the beginning, I think I had put so much pressure on myself. I boxed myself into Lerato the artist, Lerato the mother, Lerato the sister, the caregiver. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without help from family and friends. Because as a single parent, everything is on you. Weekends, I have a schedule with my mother, lovely grandmother. So she offers at least for a weekend, let me take your son, you get you time, but sometimes it's not really enough. So I've even tried to incorporate having my son in my studio. Thank God for a home studio. So you have a 1 year, 6 month old in a studio, and trying to keep him still, it's impossible. It's impossible. So I don't know if I'm slightly deviating from the question, but man, what I can say is that I've just tried to incorporate my son in everything I do. But me time, I think my son is still too young to have that. If I'm being really realistic, he's really, like Louise mentioned, especially when they're so young, it's mommy. All they want is just mommy. I hope I answered you there.
Thank you. On the next question, we wanted to ask, let's start with Bronwyn. Was there any postpartum depression after your firstborn child? Did you experience any postpartum depression?
No, I don't think I was certainly not diagnosed with it. You know, I think though what is unexpected and what every woman I think experiences post having a baby are that there are moments where both your body and the chemistry refinding itself, and then the sleep deprivation and all of those things are really overwhelming. And we, you know, you don't understand sleep deprivation until you've been awake for 6 months with a toddler an infant that doesn't stop screaming. And I think, you know, that what that does to the mind that is used to being in a kind of depth of thinking and criticality and observation and responsiveness in our making is quite devastating. And it's just something to be kind of obviously aware of in those moments, and also to find ways of working that allow you to maybe be more meditative. You know, I developed a thing in my own studio around the time of when Layla was very small, which were breath drawings as a way to, I needed to remember how to breathe and to how to come back into my practice. And I was very frustrated by how splayed I was when I was in studio and trying to make. And so I actually started developing a way of drawing with ink that had to do with inhaling as I pulled a drop of ink up and using my breath and whatever was in my body at that point to push the ink. And it was interesting because it actually started to unravel into a whole body of work that then became a very large, my biggest sculptural installation that stands at Sassel right now. So there are sometimes things that you don't anticipate, but you know somewhere inside of yourself, and it's all about responding to the context that you're in. And if it's a context of sleep deprivation and exhaustion or depression, there's work that can come from that. These things are meaningful. They resonate with others. You know, and I spotted Claire's question there about balance, and I think it's an interesting one, because there's this idea that we're like over, you know, like in our moments we're supposed to be balanced. I'm unbalanced all of the time. I'm either far too in my process, or you know, with my child, and I've learned to sort of accept that it's all about chaos and imbalance. But over time and over the trajectory, you start to realize that it is uncomfortable to be a mother and an artist at the same time, but it's also exquisitely beautiful. You know, trying to understand, have I done this 50-50, or am I balanced? Probably not. But it's about making from the space of the imbalance.
Thank you. Usha, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to answer your question around how do you keep it together by saying the answer is red wine. No, I'm just kidding. There's so much I want to add to that. Just picking up on what Bronwyn said, I mean, the focus of my work changed dramatically when I became a mother. Prior to this area of interest, I was making work around routine and travel. And then I became aware of my routine as a woman and as a mother. And my trajectory has changed since then. And now that's my language. And I don't think I would have gone there had I not been a mother, because the process of being pregnant, of giving birth, like just the whole bodily, it's so visceral that you can't ignore it. And as an artist, it just, I don't think I even did it consciously. I don't think I said, oh, this is what I want my work to be about. I think it just happened so naturally that only in retrospect I can see that the timing of that happened together with being a mother. I also wanted to just say to Lerato that, and also to Louise, that it does get easier when they start going to school, because there's a dedicated 6 hours or whatever where they are at school, and that is time for you. So it is a difficult time when they're toddlers, because you are juggling a lot more. Obviously, there are other challenges as they get older, but in terms of time, just the fact that there's a whole 2 months or 3 months where you know that from these hours they're going to be away and that's your time, it does get a lot easier. And they also become more and more independent. I mean, mine are so independent now, I don't see them. I have to struggle to find ways to connect with them and to find things of interest. Today they spent the day at the studio with me, which they haven't for a while. And they were on their devices and they had earphones on. And I just became aware of how in the past they would get so excited by what I was doing and want to be involved and engage in whatever materials I was working with. And now they were like, oh, that's cool. And then they went off and had earphones and watched movies and, you know.
Those are teenagers.
Yeah.
It's a whole another level of stress.
Completely.
Okay, so we've been speaking a lot about parenting. So now we just want to move into being relationships, basically being a wife or being in a relationship. So one of our first questions, which is a debate I also personally always have with my partner as well, is name changing. You know, once you get married and then you have to change your surname to your husband's surname. So that does it matter? Because I keep saying that, you know, I'm a brand, and if we get married now, it would be lovely. And because I'm still in like an emerging artist, it's something I can consider because I can still um, I can I can still adjust myself in the industry. But if I look two like 3 years from now, 2 years from now, in my vision, I would have definitely asserted myself in the industry, and I don't think I would necessarily change my name to my surname to my partner's surname. So we just wanted to find out from you guys how you like what dynamics you came across. Was it even a conversation? Does it matter? Does it affect the brand? Um, so let's start with Bronwyn because I know you kept your surname.
Yes, well, I mean, I was graced at birth with the surname Lace, and I married somebody called Neustädter, so it was obvious what. And my child is also Lace, but it was also a deliberate decision. I mean, I had worked hard to be known under that name, and to change it didn't feel like it was me. You know, to suddenly be somebody, to have a different name, I think would have been strange for me. But I understand why people do it too, and I think the family name is also something that means a lot and is very important. And the way that it bonds, and even then administratively, you know, I didn't ever think that I would need to be married. And I wasn't married when I had my child. I'd never fantasized about being married or having a wedding. So it didn't seem, I'd fantasized about many things, but not that. So it didn't seem particularly important, but it was only once she was actually born, and I was in the hospital and they gave me the registration papers. I filled in her name as a double barrel name, Leila Lace Neustädter, and I sent it off to get the birth certificate, and went home, and she was a few weeks old, and I realized I had never received the birth certificate. So I phoned the hospital, put me into Home Affairs, and I learned at that point, with a very strange conversation with somebody at Home Affairs, that because I gave my ID and they said, oh yes, this birth certificate's been rejected. And I said, you can't reject her, she's out, I can't put her back. And they said, no, she's illegitimate. They actually used that word. Wow. So you can't give her a double barrel name by South African law. She's either under your name as the mother, or you have to present her at Home Affairs before she's 30 days old and have it changed and put into your partner's name. And that was such a shock to me. You know, it had never occurred to me that actually the naming of my child would be dependent on my status, whether I was married or not. She became Leila Lace, and it's only much later that we decided to get married. And again, it was administratively, it was easier Leila to get both of our passports because Marcus has an Austrian passport. And so, yeah, those were my decisions. But the legalities of and the way in which marriage and babies are governed is still, to me, highly problematic, and speaks of a kind of patriarchal system that doesn't support women and independence.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
I was not aware that, you know.
Yeah. I didn't know that could happen, that a birth certificate could get rejected all because of marital status.
Yeah.
That's insightful. We want to ask, we have a few more questions. We are running out of time, but quickly, I wanted to just ask about the dynamics of being in a relationship, married or not, to another artist who is, whether one is more successful than the other. How does that, like, what are the dynamics in that relationship? Does the other partner get jealous, or also in terms of the public, do they treat you with the same respect? Do they acknowledge you at the same time, or are you sort of like pushed aside so that they can speak to you alone and your partner's not necessarily recognized? You know, what are those dynamics? Usha.
Well, I'm not married to an artist.
Yeah.
But I think relationships are tricky regardless. I don't think it's easy to be married to an artist. I think we question a lot and we go against the grain, so it can't be easy to be married to us. I mean, last year I went on a residency to France for 2 months, and I'd never been away. I've never gone on a residency since I've had kids, because how do you? And in fact, the only reason I went was because I was awarded the residency. It was not something I had applied for. And immediately when I got it, I called my husband. It was in Dakar. So I was in Senegal and I called him and I said, oh, I've been given this award and I won't take it. I'll reject it. I'll accept the honor of it, but I won't take it. Because I just knew that it's impossible. And for a male artist, obviously, those are not considerations. And he said to me, you know, this is a big deal and you should go and I'll take care of the kids. And so I did go, and he did, and he managed and he cooked and he did whatever he needed to do. But I think I don't want to say that it put a strain on our relationship, but it's not an easy thing. And I think the fact that I went and the fact that he did it doesn't speak for what happens during that time, what happens after that time. I think it's incredibly challenging. I mean, we spoke earlier about the headspace. I was in France and I was sending him texts and reminding him, oh, Simran's project is due on Thursday. Remember, you need to do this on Wednesday. You know, like their schedule was still in my mind. For 2 months, I knew what was going on in their lives. She had a netball practice, which he didn't know all these things. As women, we carry all of this, and it's kind of part of, I don't know if it's part of our makeup or our responsibility, but here I was so many thousands of kilometers away, but I was still managing the schedule. You know, I go to a hardware store and I ask for something, and every time they come back and they speak to him. He knows nothing. I'm the handyman at home, you know. And that kind of thing happens all the time. I think we live in a world where these roles are so defined, and that's why my work deals with that so much, because it's so in your face.
So would you say, as female artists, because of the roles and responsibilities we partake in, whether it's systematic or, you know, there are things that you just naturally do because you're female, especially in a relationship, and you only notice later that you that you have immersed yourself in those responsibilities or in those roles. So would you say we also tend to limit opportunities for ourselves of the roles that we see ourselves in? Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. Who are you asking? Let's hear from Louise. Louise?
Who are you asking? Definitely. I mean, I see it like absolutely all the time. It's happening in my home. I mean, I'm in the awkward or lucky, I don't know, position where my husband is in a good job, a full-time job, a very corporate type of job. It's like full on. He's expected to work at the moment about 10 hours a day. So someone's got to do the cooking and cleaning, and and he does his part when he can. There's also, while I am selling art, I'm not the main breadwinner. So we're also reliant on him doing the work. We had quite a funny chat with our kids though a few weeks ago, where the one kid said, "What does Dad do?" And we were like, "Well, Dad works." And he was like, "But why do we need Dad?" And then so we went through this whole conversation of like, Mom looks after you guys and cook and clean, and Dad does this work. And then they were like, Mom should work, Dad must look after us and do the cooking and cleaning. And the next day, my oldest kid was devastated that Dad had sat down on his desk and was now working. He was like, no, Mom is working today. Dad, you need to come play with us. Which it was really interesting, like how my kids are trying to understand these roles and like trying to make sense of it, and how it doesn't need to be like that. Yeah, it's not easy to navigate. Like I'm have moments where I'm like, stuff this, you need to cook or you need to do whatever, and he does it, and he's very good at doing it, and that's great that he's not the no, I can't do it kind of guy. But there's also like, and you're in a partnership and you need to support each other. So it's also allowing that he has this job and he needs to get it done. But yeah, finding the balance, and I liked Bronwyn's thing of there's no balance, still imbalance all the time. We know it's, yeah, but I'm finding that absolutely key, and I think this is with all relationship, is communication. Like we just got to talk all the time, and it's been really nice having him at home in the lockdown actually, because sometimes the kids are screaming in his call or during work, and he has to stop and actually like come and participate in whatever it is they're doing or wanting. And it's taken the distance away from the corporate office space and brought it into, so I think there's like a breaking down of that thing of this, like the man goes to the office and the woman is doing this crazy art career with his kids in tow, into this kind of like, we are this unit and we're all trying to do stuff together at the same time. Our house is quite small, in our little small space. And how do we navigate that and make sense of it?
Bronwyn, I have a question for you. So, I know that your partner is also an artist. Am I correct? So, is there like a hierarchy, especially in the public eye? Like maybe you're more, you have a higher status than him, or I'm not sure who exactly has the highest status between the two of you, and does that like affect your relationship in any way? Because I've also had experience with my partner. He's also an artist, but then obviously he's more well known than I. And when we're in a public space, sometimes people don't even acknowledge me because they don't know that I'm an artist. And it's all this about him, and even like the shame that you see on their face, like later on, when they realize, that I'm an artist as well. But then if I was anything else, it's still the opinions or attitudes will still have remained the same. So those are the dynamics that I experience also of dating an artist. So how is it with you and your partner?
Well, I think that the important thing is what is happening between the two of you, rather than how people treat you on the outside of your particular relationship. Because as you grow together and the time that you are together, at one point one of you is going to be in favor, and at another point another of you is going to be having an opportunity and in the limelight. And the important thing is that you're celebrating each other in whatever that moment might be, and less worried about what the kind of public opinion or attention might be. So something that I really cherish is that my partner truly celebrating something, but also he's aware if we were in a situation where he was being kind of given only attention and I was being ignored, to introduce me and to pull me in and to lift me up. And at the beginning of our relationship together, I suppose he was more well known, and I think there's probably more of a balance now. We don't really measure those things. We've collaborated on some long-term seminal projects for both of us, which was a beautiful thing to do. We had an 8-year project together, which we created, just the two of us, a community-based project in Sutherland, which manifested in a book and a film at the end. And it's something that cemented our relationship. There were moments in that project where exactly what you're describing came up. There was a newspaper article on the work that we had done and a public sculpture we had made. And this was a 50-50 project that we conceived of and created together. And in the article, it said Marcus Neustädter and his wife. And I was livid. But before I even had a chance to take up the cause, he took it up. And he demanded that they print a correction. And, and I think that that's important. The men in our lives have to be feminists too. And I'm very lucky that I have that as a partner, but it's also through constant conversation where I'm able to share with him what my realities are. And, they certainly in the early days of the life of our child, when you're breastfeeding and the child just wants your body, it's quite difficult because you watch your partner, who's also an artist, taking opportunities and going on residencies, and it's a choice for you. It feels like it's not a choice, but as a mother, I found it and have found it up until now very difficult to be away from my child. I find that I'm kind of never able to feel like myself. I feel unwell if I'm away from her for too long. And I also had a period of 3 weeks last year. And I was just aware of there's never an off switch for me. What I wanted to quickly say, though, was, I've been the director or the animateur at the Center for the Less Good Idea now for 6 years, and I've witnessed a really interesting phenomenon, which is we invite curators to build seasons over 6 months at a time. And as a whole, we've invited 15 different curators. And about, I'd say 7 of them have been women. And as a rule of thumb, the women who are curating are much more and break their backs to do so than the men who are invited, as a rule. It's been very interesting to see how when the guys are invited to curate, they pursue their own projects actively and in a determined way. And it's a collective, collaborative, performative space. So these collaborations are necessary, but generally the men hold on to their projects and their identity.
I saw you twice.
And women tend to splay themselves over multiple projects and find ways to birth everything at once. And it's been just a very interesting thing for me to notice, because it's something that I do myself, and something that I constantly have to be aware of. It does build a capacity in us, but I think that there are moments that we also can take example and say, you know what, I have a vision right now. And yes, there are multiple things in need, but there's that kind of selfish gene needs to be tapped into so that we can achieve a kind of rigor without the guilt, without those distractions in their moments. I'm not advocating for that as a whole at all, but it's just been a 6-year exercise of me watching female artists and male artists in positions of leadership, and how many men interpret leadership as my vision being manifest, and women interpret leadership as how do I hold everybody in this space. And we, you know, I think we can kind of maybe move between those more often as women.
Well, thank you so much, Bronwyn. That was actually encouraging. So I think we've come to we've run out of time. So now we're just gonna go straight into the Q&As, which I think there've been questions that have been asked throughout the whole discussion. So right now we'll just address the questions with some answers. So the first question is, what is different from being a mother artist from any other career? What particular challenges are there in this career path? Usha, may you please answer that for us?
I think an artist can't stop being an artist. If you like, whatever other job that you do, it's like a job, and you come back and you leave stuff at the office. And because it's like an innate thing, I think it's the most challenging. And I don't know how other artists work, but for me, I have to get into like an immersive state of focus in order to work. And it's very difficult to achieve that when you're scattered. So I think that's the biggest difference, that that would be the most challenging thing, is focus, and you can't separate yourself. So you are that all the time.
So there's no time off to being creative.
And it's not something you can schedule, you know, like how do you schedule insight or inspiration? You can't. It happens as a process of allowing it to happen, and you can't allow it to happen if you're preoccupied with everything else. And somehow we find it within that. I think we make it work.
So the next question that we received was, what would you say are the 3 things that could be done to better support female artists? Just not here. Let's ask Bronwyn. Bronwyn?
I think building real opportunities for women to work, and I get a little bit frustrated by shows, exhibitions, for example, when I'm curated onto, which is just, you know, female artists for the sake of female artists, and it feels a little bit like tokenism. I think building opportunities that have that are less about just in this moment we're going to show a bunch of women who have made art, to building shows that are critically engaging with topics that women would be more versed at, and that's why the conversation is interesting, and that's why there are more women than men on this show, for example, but also you know, giving women as much experience as possible in roles of leadership in the arts feels like an essential thing, and hearing their vision and developing those visions. I think, you know, as we work and as we are exposed to things, we get better and better, and we learn more. So yeah, I think you know, the one thing that occurs to me, and I don't know how you solve this, is that maternity leave, in also in response to Poka's question, just doesn't exist for artists, right? In other jobs where you see companies paying you, there's typically some form of a maternity leave. There's no such thing as an independent artist, like any freelancer or contractor. But that kind of support coming from somewhere like the National Arts Council would be, I think, go a hell of a long way for women in those first months where it doesn't feel like there's a choice to stop. So it is only traumatic to be raising an infant and trying to keep up with your career and do things. And if there was just some kind of breathing space, I think that trauma would be lessened.
So, Lerato, I know that we lost you for a bit there. So I think I'd also like to hear your opinion, especially being a single mother. So right now we're doing Q&As, and one of the questions were 3 things that could be done to better support female artists. So what's your opinion on that? Or what would you have to say? What are the 3 things you would point out that could be done to better support female artists?
I think we've lost her again.
Lost her again.
Lost her.
Okay. So we're gonna move to the last question, and then guys, any other questions, I think we'll just answer after the talk. We'll like type them out and then send them to you guys, because we have really run out of time. So the last question was that some creative suggestions for exposing children to the arts.
Louise?
I think I don't know where they went.
Well, Bronwyn, what's your response
Hi guys,
to
I'm
that?
sorry about that. I think we've been load shedded on our side.
It's like,
Apologies.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I think if I think back at my own childhood, being taken at age 10 to the Johannesburg Art Gallery. Actually, there was a little competition. I'll never forget it. The schools had a competition in Gauteng or whatever, and there was an art teacher who knew I liked to draw. I think she was actually just a normal teacher who knew I liked to draw, and she told me to make a work, and she submitted it on my behalf. Because there's no sort of art interest in my family. So, but she had noted this in me, and she submitted it, and I was one of the winners. And I don't, you know, there were like 12 or 15 other little kids, but the prize was that for 3 months, every week on a Wednesday, you went to the Johannesburg Art Gallery and you met an practicing artist who did a little course, a little work with you. And I still remember the smell of the gallery. I remember walking in, and it was that landscape exhibition that didn't change, I think, until I was 18. But I was absolutely inspired and swallowed by it. And the one of the artists was definitely Dave Andrews was there. And you know, he was a very, very young artist, obviously in the beginning of his maybe he was just starting to teach or something like that. But we did all manner of things, and I think what was beautiful about it is what happens in schools, and I see it with my child now, is that there's a kind of a copy and paste, step-by-step instruction as to how you make an artwork. So they're given a cutout and a thing, and they must put it together, and there's a rule as to how to do it, and that kills the spirit. And I remember what would happen in these sessions, and what I do with my own child is there's just a kind of an array of things that lie around, and it's not for me to solve how she's going to express herself. And when she faces a problem, I give her a range of options. And I think making is as important as seeing artwork, and obviously going to the shows and everything is essential, and encouraging them to look and comment, and they do it anyway. I mean, kids do that, but I rally against what the school calls art or craft time, because I find it really restrictive, and kids start to think that there's a proper way to draw a cloud or a human or I typically find that a preschool child draws much better than a grade 1 to grade 4 child. They kind of like obliterated in that period, and my child's in grade 3 now, and I'm working very hard to have her keep that fluidity that she's always had, and not start to kind of do it exactly as the art in school is done.
I completely agree. I've had similar. Also, I was exposed to art classes when I was very young, and I think made all the difference. Just having that freedom of expression, not in school. Yeah. And I can see it with my kids as well, Bronwyn. Like, I put things out for them, and they're just in there, and they're like pasting and coloring and, I don't know, making really odd things, but they love it.
Yeah, it's when I was I think straight after varsity, and I think a year when I was doing my BTech, and about 2 years later, so I was involved with the Pretoria Art Museum, and we did a lot of children's workshops, and we worked with many schools. But then what I observed was that a lot of schools, a lot of public schools and a lot of Black schools, they actually don't even have visual arts as a curriculum. It's only if you're fortunate enough to go to a private school or a Model C school, but even some of the Model C schools actually don't even have visual arts as a curriculum. So how do you suggest we better expose art for the kids who are less fortunate or not necessarily exposed to the arts at all? Usha, do you have something to say about it?
This is something I feel so passionate about, and it's something that it's beyond saddening me, it angers me. And the problem is a systemic problem. And until the whole system can recognize the value of arts, it won't change. I think when I go to public schools and I see the complete lack of anything creative that our kids have, it's just, it infuriates me. And I think the reason why I feel so angry is because I don't know what the solution is. I mean, we have NGOs that do amazing work, and there's little bits of things that happen all over. None of it is really sustainable. And we can make a dent, and I know we can change this child and that child and have an impact on 1 or 2 kids. But what we really need is a whole system shift, and that feels unlikely. So I'm left with this feeling of how, like, when will it happen? So it's a bit demotivating, actually, because what we need is not a lot. That's the thing. We just need access, and it's not about money. It's not about private school and public school, because a lot of what private schools are able to do in terms of art, public schools can do also. It's not about the money, it's about the willingness, and it has to come from above. And I fear that it won't come, not in the near future. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm sorry to be so pessimistic, but I'm really pissed off about how our kids don't have this.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for participating in this talk. It was really interesting. It was enlightening. I think it was worthwhile. We have recorded this conversation, so for the other guys out there who came in a bit later, we will be posting it on the Instagram, Facebook page, and the
August House Facebook page as well.
Yeah, what did I still say? So we'll be posting it on the August House
Facebook page and also the Instagram page. So this discussion will be accessible to the public. Should you want to go back to it later. But thank you guys so much for participating.
Yes,
we really appreciate it. I think these conversations are important, and they need to be put out there. And we also, as women, we need to support each other and just encourage each other. So also we got to everyone who registered their email. We'll be sending out surveys to everyone next week. So if you could just take some time to fill them in, because we are also hoping that it doesn't end at a conversation, that some sort of project can grow out of this, that can collaborate with the foundation and, you know, take this further, and it doesn't end in the air, you know.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for taking out the time to have this discussion. It was fruitful, it was inspirational, and I look forward to doing a whole lot more. So we're grateful. Thank you. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you,
well,
everyone. Bye.
Keep safe.
Yeah.